I wonder if what he learned in film, especially in his experiences with Satyajit Ray, also fed into his acting on stage. And for example, the more sort of naturalistic style of acting on stage, even in a so-called commercial play. Would that also, would you agree that there must have been all kinds of interaction between his different
Yes,
films?
yes, of course. Because Bengali theatre historically has had the burden of heritage. You speak loud, you modulate, you try to overuse your voice self consciously. The voice becomes your instrument rather than the total performance, and your interconnectivity with the objects on stage and other characters. The All these were overpowered by the play of the voice, almost almost divested of a body. This has been one of the banes of Bengali theatre in its tradition. His engagement with cinema all his life, where you have to underplay, where you have to come in close contact and interaction with your co-actor, all these subtler elements, these elements that had been virtually lost in Bengali theatre, he could bring these back, and the cinema was playing, as he told Aparna, that it's various parts of the brain. So one part of his brain had cinema quite active even when he was acting on the stage. It was the other part of the brain which was doing the stage acting, but the other part held on to the cinema, the control of the cinema, and the intimacy of the cinema. That gave a different quality to his acting, of course.
Yes. Yes. So these were some of the more visible and the less visible breakthroughs in his body of work. I wonder if we can also speak about uh, the man, his sensibility, and the ethos of that time. We're hearing words such as Renaissance used, which has been, of course, used about many people of an earlier generation. I think this is really important to talk about uh, in terms of both not being a specialist, but a cultural life actually having this variety, no walls between the different cultural practices, you know, whether it's poetry or literature or drama or acting and so on, but also the sense of values that was so much a part of an India we knew, that we grew up in, that I'm sure Aparna's father, Chidanand Das Gupta, was very much part of, or you, Shamik. So instead of reducing it, you know, crudely to any particular ideology, what was this sense of values, this framework, which I know everybody's saying Renaissance, but I think of as the idea of India? Shamik, what, you know, you were very much part of that, you know, would you tell us a little about this framework of values?
I had a long conversation with him about 3 years ago. And this was a conversation which we had decided would not be on cinema or theater, but about his political life, thinking, and the culture, the political culture in which he grew up and with which he interacted and with which he grew. So that was our theme. And at one point, I'd love to translate it for you for the Indian Culture Forum, for your Guftagu. But what came out was that he told me that it was in the 50s, in 59, when he first appeared in Hopur Shankshar, and he had just come out of college. He didn't finish his university master's course because he decided to give it up at that point. So it was the 50s. And he told me that the period 47 to 57 was a painful period in the sense of the great hopes that had been conjured up on the 15th of August and the horrible memories, even the horrible realities, I would say, not memories yet, of the communal riots. Just after that, even I remember 15th of August 1947, when I went through, I was 7 years old, and my father took me out through the city. And even the day before, we had seen the fires, heard the screams, and suddenly on that day, everything had changed literally overnight. And Hindus and Muslims were literally embracing one another, and the celebration of communal harmony along with independence. And after that, for the next 10 years, 47 to 57, it was just the decay, the continuing decay of that moment of happiness, that moment of ecstasy. So the ecstasy was withering away before our eyes. And in the 50s, resistance grew. A series of mass movements. In 52, there was literally a one paise rise in the tram fares. And there was a massive movement against that, just on a one paise rise in the fares. And leading on to police firing, violence. Immediately after that, a movement of the teachers, a movement for food. And Soumitra tells me in this interview that he took part in demonstrations in the food movement, in the movement for the teachers, where the teachers sat through days and nights in a blockade before the Raj Bhavan. And Soumitra was one of the volunteers, giving them food, providing them with water, working with other students' groups who were supporting and sustaining the movement. So his actual involvement, engagement in these movements. And with that, when he starts Opus সংসার in 1959, at that period, he had chosen a different career. He was timing himself in a different manner, his daily life, his daily activities. And he told me that that was the time when he settled down to read Marx for the first time and did a serious study of Marx, along with some of the great intellectual figures, international figures in Marx's thought at that particular point of time. J.B.S. Halden was already in Calcutta. So we were listening to Halden speaking, and the texts that came along, we were reading a lot of Christopher Hill, the great historian, and J. de Bernal. So these were his readings also. And then he comes to Marx. And he tells me at a point, I'll just do a rough translation from the Bangla text. As I started reading Marx and Engels, the one line that struck me magically and that still keeps me thinking, that almost made me mad, that line I haven't ever forgotten. All hitherto existing society is the history of the class struggle. That you can watch and study and know your history in these terms, that surprised me. And before that, all the history I had read would be in such and such a year, such and such a man became a king, and then such and such a year he died, and was killed. And he suddenly broke into a laughter as he told me these lines. But this is when the left ideology entered my thought and consciousness and became solidly entrenched there. This is the way he put it directly. And that is how he tells me again, that he realizes how the production system is the fundamental thing about all this. And he also started thinking, right at that time, he tells me, that what he was doing as a professional actor on the screen and on the stage, he was playing a role in the production system. And he was also a cog in this whole machinery, and how he was being used to tell falsehoods, to sell falsehood in the roles that he was doing in the films that he was acting in. So that sense of an inner contradiction, for a living he had to do it. And he knew every minute that he was selling himself, he was bartering himself. And that became a strong element in his conscience. And it was that element in the conscience, that core in the conscience, that led him to take part in protest movements outside the cinema, in the larger society, in the larger political arena, and to stand with the technicians in the film industry fighting for their rights against the industry. And there were several occasions, and the part of the film labor history of this part of the country at least, where organizations have been formed, organizations of resistance against the powers that be in the industry, and Soumitra plays his role there every time for the workers. So that is how his engagement with the left ethos endured. And coming to the end of our interview, he said, I remain committed to Marxism, but I can't be a part-time leftist.